So far this year, it's been pretty sweet for podcasters. So let's check in with a couple podcast builds from this year so far. Now, we're going to look at all different setups from solo to large group and different price points as well. Now, I'm going to start out with the boom arm recommendation. I recommend the Rode PSA One at minimum for anyone starting out. I know there are other options out there and much cheaper as well, but hear me out. Those cheaper ones get old real quick. They make noise when you move them around and they can be unreliable at best. The Rode PSA series is awesome and it doesn't have all those issues. And if it does, Rode is amazing and will work with you to get those issues fixed up to and including replacement. So regardless of your setup, that is my boom arm recommendation. So then, let's start at the bottom of the pile with the solo podcaster who needs one single microphone. And I know it's true, I'm not a massive fan of USB mics, but USB XLR mics are a big different story. They let you expand over time and possibly move over to an XLR setup without throwing out your gear. And as far as cheap goes, the Maono PD200x is about as cheap as it comes. Now, keep in mind, this is an $80 mic and it often goes on sale for around $60. So you get what you get. Bells and whistles are really not included. But you do get a mic that doesn't sound like absolute trash. And again, when you do decide to move up in the world to an XLR setup, you aren't on the hook for a new mic right away. Do remember though, you will outgrow this mic eventually, and it's sooner rather than later. So it isn't a forever mic. Okay, so let's say you have a few extra bucks to spend. Well, keeping up the same idea of XLR USB mics, I would say the newer Rode Podmic USB is a great starting point for a solo podcaster with a few extra bucks. Through USB, you have access to the Rode Central app, which lets you use effects to really round out the sound of the microphone. And again, even if you move to an XLR setup, the mic is good to go. Unlike the Maono though, this mic isn't spitting distance from e-waste. And if you really want to splurge, I gotta recommend the Focusrite Vocaster series. Now, these things didn't do too well in the market, so they are cheap right now, with the Vocaster One going for $100 and the Vocaster Two going for $149. That is a great deal. Do not buy the bundle though. The Focusrite branded mics and headphones are just not great at all, and worse off, they're not going to sell in the used market whatsoever. They are literal e-waste. Now, you're better off going with something like an Sm58 or similar, but if you do want to drop a few extra bucks, perhaps that Podmic or, really whatever you want at this point. If you have the money, you can do what you like here. Now, the Vocaster series has 70 dB of gain, meaning any dynamic will work fine. But if you're staying solo, you really don't need more than that. Now, let's move on to the two-person podcasts or perhaps one person with call-ins. And frankly, there is a super cheap option here. Two Rode USB mics hooked into a computer with Rode Central, and you have a very affordable setup. Something like the NT USB minis, and you're off to the races. But let's say you're looking for a bit more. And the next level up is pretty much going to go back to the Vocaster lineup. $149 for a 2-input Vocaster Two is pretty sweet. It has all those podcasting bells and whistles that the other bigger names have, and this thing will work very well for you, and it doesn't need an upgrade for quite some time. As for microphones, again, you don't have to break the bank. A couple Sm58s will work magically here. And something I didn't mention before, something great about the Sm58s, if you do decide to give up podcasting and you want to recoup your money, these things will sell for around 90% of their new cost. They are fantastic. But again, you do you when it comes to microphones. SE has some great options as you climb up the cost scale, especially from their Dynacaster series. But let's not forget about the Richie Rich podcasts and what you might want to buy if money is no option. And well, for two people, the Rodecaster Duo or the Mackie DLZ Creator XS are kind of top of the pile right now. Both sell for $500, and don't let anyone tell you that's too much money. What you get for that $500 is unbelievable. And these units will be perfect and won't need to be upgraded for a long time, if ever. Again, good resale on them if you want out as well. As for mics for the Richie Rich, well, again, I do really like the Podmic, but who are we kidding? Those SM7Bs are calling your name. And why not? You got the money, right? Just avoid spending the extra money on the SM7DB. You do not need it with these interfaces. Save yourself the extra $100 per mic. Also, if you're planning something like this with all the money in the world, there are bundle deals that will save you quite a bit of money. All companies offer them, including Rode, so I'll leave some of those linked down below. Now then, let's move on to the group podcast, and we're starting cheap again. However, we're not starting with something bad. Again, more USB Rode mics hooked to a computer will work with Rode Connect, but that is something you will grow out of super quick, so may I recommend something else? And that is the Zoom PodTrack P4. This thing is selling for a ridiculously low price of $150. Now, this thing was worth it when it was over $200. It isn't the best thing on the market, but it is the best thing on the market with 4 inputs at that price. It's literally unbeatable. 4 XLR inputs, 4 headphone inputs, the ability to use one of these channels for phone calls, you have multi-track recording, you even get sound pads. This is one of the most brilliant interfaces to come out over the past few years, and it all comes down to how accessible it is. Again, not the beacon of quality on a few fronts. The gain is a bit noisy when you get those dials cranked. Okay. It's going to turn into ASMR. Why do I end up doing a lot of ASMR with Zoom products? But a little bit of magic in post, you won't notice. And again, it's $150. What about mics for it though? Well, you can go super cheap and get 4 Behringers, but those SM58s will still keep coming up, and for the same reasons. They are fantastic mics, no fuss, no muss, and again, you sell them super easy if you upgrade or you quit. Okay then, let's talk about the next upgrade, and it might surprise you. If you need 4 inputs, but you aren't the richest person in the world, but you have a few extra bucks, the last generation of podcast mixers are still great. The original Rodecaster Pro, still a beast, and can be found used quite easily. Just don't pay too much. But if you want something new, the Tascam Mixcast 4 is selling for $400 right now. And this was my non-Rode pick from back in the day. I used this thing on remotes when I was on the radio, and it was amazing. It's a touch dated in its specs, I'm not gonna lie, but it is a massive step up from the PodTrack P4, and it has all the bells and whistles you'd expect from a larger podcasting board. As for the mics, not much changes here. SM58s are great, or you can move up to something like the Dynacaster series, or even bigger, depending on how much money you have left in your pocket. So then, let's talk the Grand Kahuna, the big 4-person podcast with no spending limit. And this has to go to the Rodecaster Pro II. Now, I do have to give a nod to the Mackie DLZ creator here as well, though you need to keep in mind it is huge, and it might need a bit more of a learning curve to get everything out of it. But either of these 2 boards will be best suited for your needs. If you require more than 4 inputs though, the Rodecaster Pro II is unrivaled in podcast boards. It can also take an extra USB mic, as well as the Rode wireless options, meaning that it can have up to 7 total microphone inputs. That is a lot of possible voices on a podcast. Now, as for those mics, the world's your oyster. SM7Bs for days, sure. But remember, Rode does have some sweet bundle deals for the Rodecaster Pro II, and you can check those out below as well. Okay then, what did I forget? I'm sure I'll hear all those voices reminding me down below. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.